Foreign Affairs, Mélanie Joly, and Environment and Climate Change Minister, Minister Guilbeault, with our colleague from the WWF, Manuel Pulgar Vidal, for an announcement on GEF. So, as to start, nous sommes maintenant accompagnés avec la...
We are accompanied with the Foreign Affairs Minister, Mélanie Joly, as well as the Minister for Environment and Climate Change, Minister Guilbeault, and as well as our colleague from WWF International, Manuel Pulgar Vidal, for an announcement on the GEF with the Government of Canada. We'll have to give the floor to Minister Joly right away. It's with great pleasure that I can see you all. I'm very happy to be next to you once again. And
after a beautiful snowstorm, so thank you to be with us. J'aimerais d'abord remercier les nations algonquines et Mohawk.
I would like to thank the Almohac and Algonquin nations to host us here on their traditional territories. COP15 is, of course, a crucial moment to guide us for a more sustainable world, to protect and preserve the nature for the benefits of all peoples. It is an opportunity that we need to seize and that we will seize. Like for climate change, loss of biodiversity is a threat for the existence of humanity. The world has realized tangible progress in biodiversity matters this week, and Canada was mobilized to respond to urgent priorities. My dear friend, Minister Guilbeault, will be able to tell us more about it, but in the name of all Canadians, I would like to thank you for your excellent work. I know this is not quite finished and that we are in the final line, but I would like to thank you because I believe that with all the colleagues here, we will have some great news to announce. Canada is proud to be the hosting state for the UN COP15 for the CBD. We would like to thank you also, the president of COP15, our dear colleagues, the Minister for the Environment, Wan Zhu, for its determination to ensure that this is a successful event and gets to some outcomes. I would like to thank also the Secretariat of the Convention and the whole UN system to have supported this organization, which is quite unique in its style, in its kind. The loss of biodiversity as well as climate change does no borders. It's a catalyst for instability, for conflicts and droughts and pandemic and hunger. And even though this is affecting all of us, the consequences can be different from one area to another, and Canada is recognizing this reality.
Depend on natural ecosystems for their livelihoods are often the most vulnerable to climate change and biodiversity loss. Small island developing states, many of whom I will be meeting later today, are suffering the most from rising sea levels, extreme climate, and declining ocean health, despite contributing to the least to climate change. We hear their concerns and know that more needs to be done. And that's why Prime Minister Trudeau announced $350 million a bit earlier this week in international biodiversity funding for a developing country. And of course, that's why my colleague will have good news very soon. Many partnerships were formed in nature this week, and these will be important for our success going forward. COP15 was an important step forward for the health of our global diversity, and thank you so much for being here. And please continue to enjoy the beautiful snow because we're very, very proud of our snowstorm. Thank you.
La parole est à vous, Ministre Guilbeault.
The floor is yours, Minister Guilbeault. Thank you, Honorable Mélanie Joly, but hopefully I can say Manuel. Manuel, thank you very much for being here with us, and welcome, and thank you for being here for this announcement. I'm grateful to my colleague and friend, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Mélanie Joly, for being here, which is a testimonial of the unity of the Canadian government when addressing the environmental challenges that we have to tackle, and she's always been a great ally in those issues. The message is clear today. Canada supports developing countries in their efforts to protect nature. I'm really grateful for being here and for being on my side for the announcement that we're gonna make in a few days. Over the last few days, we demonstrate our commitment and our determination and compromising and success. All the countries who are here in Canada have a voice, and we consider them on the same equal footing, both the countries from the global south and the global north. And of course, the success has to go through the success and the inclusivity of all the developing countries where most of the biodiversity is located in the world. So all the countries generate some advantages for the global biodiversity and the global population, the species, and all ecosystems. So I am therefore very happy to announce a funding of $250 million for 4 projects in developing countries. Those projects are aiming to favor biodiversity whilst fighting climate change.
Starts with uniting the world around our ambitious goal of protecting 30% of global lands and waters by 2030. Science tells us that it is the minimum for the survival and sustainability of the planet. We know that we can't get our goal without continued support to countries who have a majority of the biodiversity, but not always the means to protect it. So that's why today Canada is announcing an additional $255 million in funding to support initiatives that are helping developing countries to protect nature and improve climate resilience. The majority of this funding is Canada's newest support for the Global Environment Fund, the Global Environment Facility, the funding mechanism of the Convention on the Biodiversity Framework. This now makes Canada the 7th largest contributor to the GEF. Those funds will also support the Feminist Climate Action in West Africa, the United Nations Development Programme's Biodiversity Finance Initiative, and the Moroccan Forestry Strategy for all nature-positive projects. This fund builds on $1 billion Canada has allocated within our climate finance commitments for projects that leverage nature-based solutions and deliver biodiversity co-benefits, and as Melanie said a little bit earlier, also builds on the $350 million announced by the Prime Minister to assist developing countries in their efforts to halt and reverse the loss of biodiversity. We're now in the final chapter of COP15. The whole world is watching us, and I know we can make the necessary decisions, however difficult they may be, in order to halt biodiversity loss and turn the tide worldwide. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you very much, dear Minister. Manuel?
For just switching into English. Thank you, Minister Joly. Thank you, Minister Guibault, Melanie, and Stephen. And congratulations for 2 things. First, for hosting us in this COP15. Gracias. Despite of the snow, you have to feel proud of the snow. It's a beautiful view, at least a beautiful view. But also for today's announcement. Because when we think about a process related to the Convention on Biological Diversity or the Global Biodiversity Framework, the way to get success on this process, it is by combining different elements. The first one, as Minister Guibault mentioned, it is to get a clear vision and a strong objective. In that sense, negotiators are taking their time. It is natural, it is part of the process, and we hope that by the end of the 19th, we can get and we can achieve a strong global biodiversity framework. So that is the first piece. But also we do need to have political willingness. And this announcement, it is showing the political willingness of Canada, but also the timing, because it was just in the beginning of this COP when President Trudeau announced that resource mobilization, and now, soon, quickly, we are looking how quick Canada it is defining a commitment to strengthen the GEF. And that moves me to the third element, that it is how much we have to continue working with strong pieces that have helped us to move the process forward. You remember that the Global Environmental Facility was created in 1992, so 30 years ago. And they have worked in several replenishment, and this is contributing, this announcement, this commitment of Canada, it is contributing to those replenishment that by the end will be channeled to those countries, to those parties, to those institutions that needs that resources to implement, to execute, and to help us to reverse nature loss, because that is a key element. And that moves me to the 2 last elements that can make the success. It is, for this COP, we have built a strong momentum. It is amazing how dynamic this COP it is. in comparison what used to be in the past. So we have to keep this momentum alive. So after the close of this COP in December 19, we have to continue executing, implementing, exercising our role to keep this momentum alive. Because that will be the only way in which we could be able to address the intertwined crisis in relation to climate and nature. As you mentioned, Minister Joly, it is really important to address those crises in the same time with effective actions and in a way in which for the future we can celebrate that we are moving our actions into the Sustainable Development Objective. So congratulations to Canada. Welcome to this big announcement. Thank you for the timing of this commitment, and let's continue having this kind of announcement to by the end of this COP, we can say we did it, let's celebrate, and let's continue working for a better planet for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. We will now start a small question period. We ask that whenever you are chosen, please stand up, state your name and media. This question period is for media only. On va commencer la période de questions. S'il vous plaît, vous...
We're going to start our question and answer sessions. Please stand up when you will need to identify yourself by stating your name and your media organization. And we'll only ask the media to ask questions as we're tight on time. So let's start. Mrs. Surrey for Press in Canada. Elisa Surrey, Press in Canada. Mr. Guilbeault, Madame Joly. Mr. Manuel has just talked about momentum and the timing of this announcement. What kind of message do you want to send to the countries present here on Friday, a few days away from the end of the conference? Well, you have heard, just like I did, that for the last few days, from some countries, from several developing countries, that the question of mobilizing resources is an important challenge and an important issue at stake for this conference. This is a reason why I have several times, as well as other ministers from donating countries, we have underlined the fact that we have heard that call. Therefore, we had a statement yesterday from 14 founding countries that demonstrates that we have already doubled our aid to biodiversity, the direct aid to biodiversity, 14 donor countries in public funds. And this announcement from Canada is coming to strengthen one of the institutions that is very important for us within the global efforts in order to tackle the biodiversity losses, such as the Global Environmental Fund. So the message is that we hear you. Not only we hear you, but we also want to support your conservation efforts in developing countries. And if I can just quickly add something. We are totally aware with the Canadian government that COP15 is taking place in Montreal, that Stephen Guilbeault has been working really hard for the last 2 weeks for it to be a real success. And also, this will certainly be, well, one of the great legacy of the work from my environment minister and also from the government. So rather than just speak in a general manner in terms of environment, what we want to do here is also to talk about the importance of biodiversity in particular, whilst this COP15 will, we hope, then be historic for the protection of biodiversity. Many thanks. Next question, Mr. Chandraver. Hello, Benjamin Legendre from Agence France Presse. I have a question for Mr. Guilbeault. Could you please sum up with this $250 million that you've announced? What is the contribution for Canada for biodiversity in terms of international aid for biodiversity between the GEF and also the bilateral funding? Well, this announcement today means that our total for the last year is $1.5 million in contributions for the South countries, specifically on biodiversity matters. Madame in the front row.
Also a question for Minister Guilbeault. The reform of the Global Environment Facility is very much at the center of the discussion at COP15. Can you tell us a little bit more about what exactly is on the table, the details, a little bit about the reform of the GEF that is being considered by the countries? Thank you.
I mean, we've certainly heard the calls by many that feel that some changes need to be brought forward to the GEF, either here on biodiversity. I've also heard that, as you know, Canada and Germany for the last 2 years have been working on the $100 billion delivery plan as part of the climate change commitment. And one of the things we've heard, and it's not just from the GEF, but it's a general issue with access to funding from multilateral institutions. I can't tell you specifically what the GEF is envisioning. You can obviously ask them. They're here. Carlos is here. There was a session a little bit earlier, but I know that they're very open and they are listening to the calls from many developing countries. I've been here for 11 or 12 or maybe 13 days. I'm not sure, but I've met many people from the global south, from South America, from small island developing states, from Africa, who say that they have a very good relationship with the GEF, and the GEF has been a very good ally and supporter of their project. So I don't want people to leave this press conference, this COP, thinking that nothing that what the GEF does works, because there's a lot of people who are very happy with the GEF, but I think we can always do better, and that's certainly the spirit that I'm hearing Carlos and the GEF speak about what they want to do. Manuel, would you like to?
Yeah, and let me add something. Because there is a strong connection between resource mobilization and ambition. As much ambition we can get, as more resources the GFs can channel. That is key. So that is why we have to continue moving things towards an ambitious global biodiversity framework. And with that, I am sure that the US will continue strengthening itself to provide those resources that are needed to achieve with our objectives.
Merci, Manuel. Dernière question, Monsieur Léveillé.
Many thanks, Manuel. Last question, Mr. Léveillé. Hello, Jean-Thomas Léveillé from the press. I have a technical question. Or the $255 million something that is recurrent, and there is another more global question. There are some announcements left, right, and everywhere. Can you tell us, please, where we're at in terms of mobilizing financial resources and also in terms of the negotiations on that matter? Are we getting towards an agreement? And if so, what will be the amount? Right. The reply to your first question is that the Global Environmental Fund works with 4-year funding cycles. So we are at the 7th cycle, and therefore this contribution from Canada. So specifically, we are financing 4 projects. Out of the 255 millions, there are 219 millions that will go to the GEF, Global Environmental Fund. That's for this period, which is replenishment, and in order to refinance. And therefore, this is for the next 4 years. That's the first thing. The second point, and I was talking about this earlier on, but there was this joint announcement by 14 donor countries to show that jointly our financial contributions over the last few years have doubled compared to the previous decade for biodiversity. Of course, we are always working on the text, specifically on the finance mobilization, and it's not just Canada and Egypt who have that particular duty, but also other parties too. But I can't tell you exactly where we will end up, but we were ready for the climate change issue collectively to commit ourselves and to pledge to give $100 billion per year from all sources, multilateral funds, private sector, philanthropic sectors, and also public sectors. And I cannot see really how we could not be prepared within such negotiations to commit and pledge for the same thing for biodiversity. Maybe not in the same amount, but something quite similar. But I will also state specifically, because I said so earlier on in English, that this additional 255 million contribution from Canada means that Canada has donated $1.5 billion for the last year.